Go ahead. I hope you have better luck than we had. Remember to stay off the sand. The antlions are edgy right now.
Floor is lava. Building gameplay around broadly understood concepts like the floor is lava made training it easy. We liked how our physics system allowed for a high degree of creative freedom in how players chose to tackle it. Some built walkways out of many objects, while others focused on using just their two favorite sheets of metal. Some carefully followed the path up in the rocks, concerned about falling, while others moved directly towards the exit, perched on objects just above the sand. Playstyles varied. Some players considered it a failure if they summoned antlions, reloading immediately, while others enjoyed scrambling back up on the rocks to recover. We also liked that it functioned as a navigation puzzle, but could be turned into an arena if players preferred. Some just jumped onto the sand and fought their way to the end.
hunter. The explosive barrels are provided for players to use against antlions while standing safely within the thumper's protection. But we're also using this as a hint for the upcoming antlion guard encounter, where players often use similar tactics to win the fight. Optional player actions, like launching explosives with a gravity gun, can be forgotten if they aren't used regularly. With the wide range of offensive options we give players, there's no guarantee they've used this ability recently. So here, we're subtly suggesting they bring it back into their toolkit before they face the guard.
Vortigaunt Extraction. This arena presented some tricky design problems for a couple reasons. First, the guard is a melee-only enemy, so we couldn't allow the player to reach areas where the guard couldn't follow. We did experiment with a few range attacks, but didn't like the result. Its goose-spitting attack, for instance, ended up looking ridiculous. The only non-melee attack that survived was its ability to bash physics objects at the player, but this required objects to be in range, which isn't always guaranteed. The second challenge was ensuring that no matter where the guard dies, the Vortigaunt can reach its corpse. This was essential as the game can't proceed if the Vortigaunt is unable to extract the bug bait. Vortigaunt Extraction. This arena presented some tricky design problems for a couple reasons. First, the guard is a melee-only enemy, so we couldn't allow the player to reach areas where the guard couldn't follow. We did experiment with a few range attacks, but didn't like the result. Its goose-spitting attack, for instance, ended up looking ridiculous. The only non-melee attack that survived was its ability to bash physics objects at the player, but this required objects to be in range, which isn't always guaranteed. The second challenge was ensuring that no matter where the guard dies, the Vortigaunt can reach its corpse. This was essential as the game can't proceed if the Vortigaunt is unable to extract the bug bait.
The Freeman must follow. The Freeman will do wise to heed our extraction of the Myrmidon's aromatic pheropods. The process is not entirely hygienic, therefore stand aside. The Freeman will have need of these pheropods on the paths ahead. Gather them now. The Freeman must follow.
In rare cases, players could find themselves unable to kill the antlion guard in this arena. This would happen if they ran out of ammo or had misused all of the available physics objects, leaving nothing to launch with the gravity gun. To address this, we added a citizen on the mounted turret above the gate as a failsafe, allowing a stuck player to rely on a citizen to kill the guard.
The Freeman must excuse us. It is rude of us to commune by flux shifting in front of those whose portal inputs are.
Get going, Dr. Freeman. Nova Prospect is just ahead. One man alone wouldn't stand much chance going in there. A man with a...
The Freeman honors us by his presence. Follow, Freeman.
Bug bait training. This clumsy bug bait training is where we landed, having run out of time, but needing players to understand the tool for Nova Prospect's design to work. Generally, we aim to add enough flavor and context to training so it doesn't feel like training. It feels like a natural part of discovering something new. Here, though, we didn't quite manage that. As obvious as it may seem, bug bait wasn't something players intuitively grasped. We're well into the game now, so players have plenty of experience dealing with enemies. Before we added any training, the first playtesters who collected bug bait entered the next level and instinctively shot the first antlion they saw, because that had been working up until then. Half-Life tends to encourage a shoot first, ask questions later approach. Similarly, when players reached Nova Prospect, they didn't think to throw bug bait at the Combine soldiers and instead relied on their usual weapons. So, we needed this training not only to show how bug bait works, but also to demonstrate that antlions would be close to the player without attacking.
Mark it well with another theropod. The Freeman again excels in all tasks. Now, attend well. Apply pressure to your theropod to signal the antlions in your command to follow you. The Freeman shows his excellence in all things. And now this one must bid the Freeman farewell. Nova Prospect lies just beyond. Remember well what you have learned here. The Eli Vance has greatest confidence in you.
Thumper Final Stage. We liked the final stage of Thumpers, where their purpose is inverted. Now, instead of serving as a tool for safety, they act as a blocker for the player's antlion army. However, we probably should have incorporated more thorough Thumper training before this point. While it was acceptable for players to only partially understand Thumpers in the earlier coast levels, the stakes are higher now because players are also trying out bug bait for the first time. Players who don't realize that this first Thumper prevents their antlions from moving forward may misunderstand how bug bait works. If they throw bug bait at soldiers in the first bunker and no antlions arrive, they might conclude that bug bait is unreliable or doesn't work as expected and switch back to using their weapons instead.
Assault on Nova Prospect. With an infinitely respawning antlion army on a coastline assaulting a fortified Combine base, it was hard not to try a Normandy-inspired level. Our initial prototype featured trenches leading up to Nova Prospect, with lethal machine guns forcing the player and their antlions to stay within the trenches to survive. It was thrilling to have machine gun fire and leaping antlions constantly passing above the trenches. Unfortunately, we couldn't make it work within our performance budget, and ultimately had to set it aside in favor of a completely different layout. However, the mounted guns remained, as their lethality proved useful in encouraging players to rely on their antlions.
Alert. Contact status 0 with Land C intercept team. Possible anti-system 1 assessment. All Nova prospect stabilization delegated. Move to hard point. Nova prospect stabilization for Directive 2. Engage reserve. Contain exigent incursion.
Nova Prospect Yard. The combat throughout the Nova Prospect Yard was largely inspired by our early observations of antlions fighting Combine soldiers. The antlions' high mobility and melee attacks paired well with the soldiers' range lethality and vulnerability up close. Antlions look great under fire, with particle effects flying everywhere, and when they finally reach a soldier, the resulting ragdoll effect is incredibly satisfying. Nova Prospect Yard. The combat throughout the Nova Prospect Yard was largely inspired by our early observations of antlions fighting Combine soldiers. The antlions' high mobility and melee attacks paired well with the soldiers' range lethality and vulnerability up close. Antlions look great under fire, with particle effects flying everywhere, and when they finally reach a soldier, the resulting ragdoll effect is incredibly satisfying.
Magic Wall. Like many of our combat arenas, we needed a gate of some kind to prevent players from moving on before they finished this fight. Unfortunately, we were out of time and had to move on to the train station, so we ended up with this bit of magical bullshit. A wall that just explodes after the second gunship is defeated, revealing the way forward. We reassured ourselves that most players wouldn't notice, as they'd be busy fighting the gunships, and our playtesting had shown that generally they all finished the fight before they reached this point. With enough explosions throughout the arena, the destroyed, burning wall felt pretty natural, so we threw in a couple of simple gas puzzles on the other side to justify it. But no, we're not exactly proud of it. Magic Wall. Like many of our combat arenas, we needed a gate of some kind to prevent players from moving on before they finished this fight. Unfortunately, we were out of time and had to move on to the train station, so we ended up with this bit of magical bullshit. A wall that just explodes after the second gunship is defeated, revealing the way forward. We reassured ourselves that most players wouldn't notice, as they'd be busy fighting the gunships, and our playtesting had shown.
The player has just completed 2 combat-heavy levels, so we wanted to slow things down once they got inside. These early levels were designed as a pacing change, allowing players to explore the layout of Nova Prospect's interiors. Along the way, we began to introduce the turret gameplay, first as an enemy to the player, and later as a tool they could use. Much of this level was built by reusing prototypes and art spaces created earlier in the project, when we were focused on shaping the look of Nova Prospect.
Turrets. Turrets were a useful design tool when the player had bug bait, as they could completely prevent antlions from approaching them head-on. This allowed us to create setups where the player couldn't just throw bug bait to proceed. They needed to circle around and clear the turrets so their antlions could follow. It didn't hurt that watching antlions get mowed down by turret fire was a great visual too.
Nova Prospect process. Like Ravenholm, Nova Prospect was initially designed with significantly different gameplay than what ultimately shipped. The first version focused on player versus combine soldier combat, with no involvement of antlions. Unlike other areas of the game where gameplay and art evolved together, Nova Prospect received a large art push early on. This produced a set of reusable, polished sections of level geometry with art already applied. Assembling Nova Prospect from these pieces worked well, as the prison's layout was naturally repetitive. And then later, when we returned with antlions and bug bait, we had to repurpose the geometry to fit the new gameplay.
Attention Nova Prospect internal containment. Desilence all political conscripts in Block A7. Prohibit external contact.
Allied antlions. Having an endlessly respawning antlion army attacking turrets and soldiers meant we had to spend time figuring out the player's role in Nova Prospect's combat. The player had already faced plenty of Combine soldiers, so we decided to make combat here feel more like a puzzle and a spectacle instead of a combat challenge. With that in mind, we created setups that remained in a steady state until the player intervened. By directly killing enemies, the player could tip the balance in favor of the antlions, but we wanted to make bug bait usage especially rewarding. In many scenarios, when the player threw bug bait onto enemies, we activated additional antlion spawners, unleashing a rapid rush of new antlions into the fight. The resulting carnage was the reward that made bug bait satisfying to use.
Ragdoll Vortigaunt. There's a lot of pain to see in this dead Vortigaunt, pain of our level designers. At the time, our development tools didn't allow us to directly pose a ragdoll, which is to say, when an NPC dies and it systemically ragdolls to the ground, we didn't have any control over what pose it ended up in. If we'd had some animator time, they could have given us a single frame animation and roughly the pose we wanted, but we were late and our small animation team was already overloaded. So a level designer positioned the Vortigaunt above the chair, told it to die as the level loaded, and waited to see what pose the ragdoll settled into. Then the designer moved the Vortigaunt slightly and tried again. We can't remember exactly how many attempts it took, but it was way, way more than you'd think.
Laser mines. We really enjoyed bringing these laser trip mines into Nova Prospect. They were a weapon from Half-Life 1 we hadn't managed to include in Half-Life 2, but at least they found a place as a puzzle element. We liked how they served as a kind of personal morality test when the player had an antlion army. Some players immediately threw bug bait past the trip mines. sending antlion bodies at the problem, while others had their little buddies back until they'd safely removed the trip mines with other tools. We didn't judge.
D2 Prison 04. Throughout development, our artists created small vertical slices of environments, which we called art zoos. These zoos laid out how to use textures and props to create gameplay spaces that achieved our visual goals. However, when building the prison's gameplay track, the repetitive layout allowed us to use the art more directly. This map was initially built as the primary art zoo for Nova Prospekt, but after being used to test various gameplay prototypes, including those that eventually led to Bugbait, it became part of the actual level architecture.
Critical.
Contact lost in Block B2. Deploy. Reinforce. Intercept. Central.
D2 Prison 04. Throughout development, our artists created small vertical slices of environments, which we called art zoos. These zoos laid out how to use textures and props to create gameplay spaces that achieved our visual goals. However, when building the prison's gameplay track, the repetitive layout allowed us to use the art more directly. This map was initially built as the primary art zoo for Nova Prospekt, but after being used to test various gameplay prototypes, including those that eventually led to Bugbait, it became part of the actual level architecture.
His reputation is such that other desperate renegades are likely to grant him a great deal of license in the spirit of spreading general that precluded further development of covert skills. Slow, let alone capture. An ordinary transhuman forces are to prove themselves an indispensable augmentation to the Combine Overwatch. They will have to earn the privilege. I'm sure that the alternative, if you can call it that, is total extinction. In union with all the other unworthy branches of the species. Let's not allow it to come to that. I have done my best to convince our benefactors that evidence to back it up. My words sound increasingly hollow even to me. The burden of proof is on you, as is the consequence of failure. have been asked. As is the consequence of failure. I'll just leave it at that. I have been asked to say a few words to the transhuman arm of Sector 17 Overwatch concerning recent successes and containing members of the Resistance Science Team. Let me say up front that I regret having to temper my heartfelt congratulations with a strong measure of disappointment. But I wouldn't be doing my duty as your administrator. That's the message I have received from...
D2 Prison 05 start. With the player able to move a large number of objects, we often ran into challenges, especially given the limitations of 2003's CPUs. One limitation was that our AI navigation system wasn't aware of dynamic physics objects, like these metal beds. While our NPC movement system could detect and avoid physics objects while moving, they were essentially invisible during navigation queries for strategic planning before movement. This was primarily due to performance limitations. We couldn't afford anything more complex. We also faced design challenges without clear solutions, like how a soldier should respond if a player completely blocked a corridor with large physics objects. To address this, we gave NPCs additional strength to push physics objects around. We then mitigated the issue through level design, widening corridors and ensuring enough empty space to handle props landing anywhere within them. This setup is a high-risk one. The combination of soldiers hiding behind beds and antlions charging for melee attacks creates a good chance of awkward interactions between the NPC movement system and the beds.
Laundry. By the time the player reaches this level, known as Laundry, we're confident they're comfortable using bug bait to solve combat scenarios. So, we wanted to raise the stakes a bit by creating a scenario that encourages the player to get even more involved, combining bug bait with their full set of weapons.
Kitchen. It's a well-known custom among game developers that all video game kitchens must feature a gas explosion.
D2 Prison 05 start. With the player able to move a large number of objects, we often ran into challenges, especially given the limitations of 2003's CPUs. One limitation was that our AI navigation system wasn't aware of dynamic physics objects, like these metal beds. While our NPC movement system could detect and avoid physics objects while moving,
Laundry. By the time the player reaches this level, known as Laundry, we're confident they're comfortable using bug bait to solve combat scenarios. So, we wanted to raise the stakes a bit by creating a scenario that encourages the player to get even more involved, combining bug bait with their full set of weapons.
Kitchen. It's a well-known custom among game developers that all video game kitchens must feature a gas explosion.
One-way drops. Players never know what's ahead of them, but they're familiar with what's behind them, so it's common for them to retreat to familiar ground when they encounter an enemy. If we've built an arena where we want the player to engage, especially for an enemy with specific geometry requirements, like the Antlion Guard, we need a way to prevent that retreat. A common solution is to require the player to enter the arena through a one-way drop, something you've likely noticed a few times already.
Alex's toolkit. Alex's multi-tool is incredibly useful for letting us use her as a key. Often we needed to keep the player from moving forward until we were ready, and her multi-tool allowed her to deliver dialogue while unlocking the way ahead. We probably relied on it a bit too much, but it was hard to resist. There's always a trade-off. Using Alex to gate a room instead of creating a custom solution saved time that we could spend on other parts of the game, often more critical ones.
Alex as companion. This section became an unintentional prototype for what Episode 1 would eventually feature, Alex as a companion, moving smoothly along a path that blends dynamic combat with scripted choreography. We didn't yet have a clear model for how she would fit alongside the player in these scenarios, but even this brief section taught us a lot, despite not having enough time to iterate on it.
Right. Over here. This'll get me into their security system. Now to find my father. Oh my god. These poor people. There. All right, I think I can bring him in. There! He's on the way. Let's go meet him.